let's talk about this Celtics versus Bucks game. This is really the title match at the East, and we've seen these teams, and their matchups are normally reflective of how the season is gonna go. You see, last year the Bucks lost every single game to the Celtics, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a blowout each time, which basically meant that the Celtics could not be stopped by the Bucks last year. And it was very indicative that the Celtics were going to get farther than the Bucks for this reason, because even though the regular season is obviously less intense than the playoffs, there is something to be said that when great teams are healthy and they go up against each other, then it matters to see how their skill levels pertain. You see, now, this season, now that we have Chris Middleton playing well, or at least, being Chris Middleton again, now that we have Giannis doing his thing, and now that we have Damian Lillard on the Bucks, we've seen them be able to come together and really have a cohesive piece of basketball, and which we can point to and say, wow, this is a good team. They've recently figured out their struggles. They've finally found how to play together. And in my opinion, even if Adrian Griffin is not the most reliable coach, there is something to be said about this team. This team is amazing. The Celtics and the Bucks are both really incredible. The Celtics are just one of those teams which work on every level. They are the modern day perfect basketball team. Like, you had the Celtics in the 80s, where you had the Celtics in the 80s where they were just like pinpoint exactly what that era looked for. You had also the Lakers, and you have every decade, you have some teams which are like, this team is the team of the decade. They play exactly for what the times call for. They are good in every way, and they all, are based upon the values and the way that basketball is played. You see, we saw this in the 2000s. We saw that being, produced by the Spurs. The Spurs played that decade perfectly. They had big men, they had strength, but they also had shooting and they had pace. In the 2010s, you saw the Miami Heatles, which played perfectly to the 2010s. They played smaller, they played with more shooting, they played a faster, way of basketball, but they still had guards and wings and forwards which were big enough to still defend. Which that was the pace, and that was the way that the 2010s were defined. And in my opinion, for every decade, you have around two teams. And for the 2020s, I think this Boston Celtics team is really indicative of what the perfect basketball team should look like for the 2020s. They are good, confident, can shoot, can defend, have a point guard which can guard. Their entire starting lineup has great defense, even better offense. They can all shoot, they can all get it their way, they can all make their own shots. And in my opinion, when we look at the epitome of what every team is trying to achieve with their starting lineup, the Celtics come to mind as probably the only team that is like a realistic expectation. You have two wings as your best players. You have your center core, is based upon skill. And even if we see, the Celtics struggling, it's mostly due to the fact that their team was just playing better, not the fact that they were just, completely crashing out. So in my opinion, when we see something like this, and also when we see the way that they've been playing together, which is very well, we have to look at the Celtics and go like, yo, they're one of the best teams, and they might win the championship this year if we're being 1,000% honest. With the other team, which was playing this game, they're no short of another great team as well. I wouldn't take it as far as I did for the Celtics, because I do believe that the Celtics starting five is amazing, but the Bucks are phenomenal. They're one of these teams which just works because they have so many great pieces. The worst problem about the Bucks is that they always kind of play playoff basketball. They're always kind of slow, tough defense, not a lot of pace. They're normally more based on, you know, having a cohesive offensive system that works in every scenario with whatever pace, with whatever structure that they have, and that's been evidenced through the years. Now that they brought in Dame's really made it a point to bring more offense to this team and allow the team to be able to open up more due to their 3-point shooting now being a bigger point of emphasis, and this has all caused Milwaukee to be a great team. And in this game, even though Milwaukee only lost by 3, they had to have a huge comeback, and that was mostly predicated on their guys being able to play the game. They play through their stars, which is a very traditionalistic system. Though it's the same thing that the Lakers do, and it's the same thing even that like the Nuggets do, where it's like you play through your stars primarily, and then the rest, you leave it up to the team, and you just kind of have to trust them with that. So when we see the Bucks have been great this year, and they finally figured out their defensive struggles, and they're all not their defensive struggle, their defensive and their offensive struggles at the same time. And when now we look at the Bucks and we look at what they've been doing recently, we just gotta say the Bucks look good. They do look good. And I think that with more chemistry and Chris Middleton coming back into shape, and Giannis, playing more like Giannis, I feel like this team is only going to keep getting better. I do believe that we have to see a uptrend and a boost in this team in 3-point shooting. I feel like it would be good to have more players which can space the floor for you, so the paint is more open for Giannis. But I do really like what the Bucks did this game and the way that they came back from the Celtics. Now, when we look at this game, what we have to look at is really that fourth quarter. In that fourth quarter, Milwaukee just put on a clinic to come back, and they really it was the same thing that happened in the Lakers game, where they just punched in until eventually they could, get their stuff off straight. And in my opinion, with this Milwaukee versus Boston game, even though it looked good and it was a great game, they lost basically by 6 points. The stat sheet says differently, but if it was that basically that running 3 that was hit with 1 second left on the clock, and it was a hit by Malik Beasley. So, the game was really a 6-point game, and in my opinion, this game was great. I do feel like these tight matchups are great, and the Celtics versus the Bucks is always going to be an elite game. I personally believe that these are the 2 best teams in the East. They're both teams which have gone far in the playoffs, been to the finals, have stars which really can play the game the correct way, and have made themselves both threats to win the championship every season. And we know that they're going to have to face each other when they get to the playoffs and when they get to, deep places of the season, that this is going to be the matchup that we're going to look forward to. And in my opinion, that's a powerful thing. I wanted to talk about it because every single time those 2 teams face, it's always a battle for who's first in the conference. And they also both share a very similar, situation this year, where they both revamped their teams with moves which seem like they're going to win them the championship. And they're both up on the line of, if we don't make the finals this year, then what are we doing? Last year, the Celtics were talking about, we need moves to make this team better. We need moves to renovate our system because obviously they had lost 3 times over, and that was incredible. What they did in 2022, but in 2023 they completely stunk the bed and had lost many times. With the Bucks, it was the same thing. Losing repeatedly since their 2021 championship had caused them to just kind of go, well, we need to do something. And both of these teams revamped. Their season is on the line, and that's why these games are so interesting, because the stories are amazing, and they know that they're each other's biggest enemy. Yeah.